I've been asked many questions during my time as a GTFO content creator, and of course, I've heard some questions asked multiple times over and over again. One of the questions I've heard many times is this: is GTFO a run and gun game or a stealth game? Now, I would say at its core, GTFO is more so leaning towards being a stealth game, but there are some run and gun moments inside of it. And this really just depends on the level itself, as well as your own group's skills and your experience. So, how about today we go over a level that's purposely designed to be a bit of both, as well as a little bit more, even. Hello everyone, Professor Scaly here, and welcome to my R7C3 level guide. For this level, I recommend you bring with you a bio tracker, a mine deployer, and then 2 sentries. Either 2 burst sentries, 2 sniper sentries, or 1 of each. I don't really recommend the shotgun sentry though, because just like I've said before in previous level guides, it's nowhere near as powerful as it was back in Rundown 2. I remember when the shotgun sentry was basically the king of all sentries for a while, and man, I sort of do miss those days, and I hope that in Rundown 8, the shotgun sentry gets one heck of a buff. That way it maybe isn't the most powerful sentry of them all, but it's at least a little bit more viable. That way I can finally recommend it in one of these level guides. But why are we bringing the rest of the tools with us? Well, the bio tracker, we're taking this into the level because the first half of it is nothing but stealth. You have no ammunition whatsoever to start off with, you have no tool refill whatsoever, and you're not going to find any until about halfway through the level. So even if you did bring maybe 2 mine deployers and 2 sentries, or a mine deployer and 3 sentries, you're not going to be able to take advantage of any of them for the first half of the level, and even when you get to the second half and you can take advantage of them, there's not enough tool refill to sustain that many tools that consume tool refill. And if that isn't quite enough to convince you, well, if you're going for the optional objectives, the extreme objective will require you to fight nothing but shadows, shadow giants, and shadow scouts, and once you finish it, the entire level is covered in pitch black darkness, and later in the level, when you do the second half, there will be waves of shadows and shadow giants added into the mix. So you should bring a bio tracker with you. If you don't, you are literally handicapping your team and making it quite a bit more difficult. When it comes to the mine deployer, while this is useless for the first half, just like any of the other tools, it is incredibly helpful for the second half of it, because you're going to have to do a Warden Survival Protocol objective. Basically, survive for 20 minutes until you're allowed to leave the level. And in these type of objective levels, you almost always want to bring a mine deployer with you, as they help out tremendously. You're going to have waves upon waves of enemies coming after you pretty much this entire duration, and these waves of enemies are going to have a lot of them in there. You're going to have maybe something like 6 or 7 giants, or about 20 or so regular smaller enemies. So instead of having to shoot every single one of them or letting the sentries deal with them, why don't we just fall back behind a door, shut that door, maybe slap a C-foam grenade on it, place a mine on the door, and just let that mine kill almost everything so we could just continue on with our merry way and go about the rest of the level. And then finally, when it comes to the 2 sentries, these are to give us a little bit of extra firepower. There will be a lot of moments where you could take really good advantage of the mine deployer or utilize it and make things so much easier for your team, but there are portions in this level where you have to stay in one area for a pretty lengthy amount of time, so your doors are eventually going to be used up one by one and you won't have any left. And placing mines out in the open is really inefficient. So for those moments where we can't take advantage of doors and use the mine deployer, why don't we just slap down a sentry or 2 and just fall back behind them and let the hordes of enemies come through those sentries, and then we just shoot them and give the sentry some backup fire. That way you're doing sort of a 50-50 split between ammunition and tool refill. Dropping down to the level, you'll see that your main objective is to find a specific terminal and create an uplink at said terminal, and this terminal will always be located inside zone 163, and you're going to be starting off inside zone 160. And starting off in the level, you'll notice that you don't have any ammunition or tool refill whatsoever, and this is the general theme for the first half of the level. No matter how many boxes or lockers you open, you will not find a single ammo pack or tool refill. You'll only be able to find med packs, as well as a few consumables here and there. So you're going to have to melee kill pretty much everything, or just simply stealth right past it. Although in the first few zones, you're going to have to kill every single room, as keeping them alive is pretty dangerous. Thankfully though, this isn't all that difficult, because this level provides you with a lot of C-foam grenades and a lot of C-foam trip mines. So many to the point where you could basically use them as much as you want to stealthily deal with these enemies without risk of them smacking you back or waking anything else up, and you'll still have plenty to deal with the rest of the level when you need to. So grab those C-foam grenades and trip mines, use them to deal with the hybrids and the giant strikers, and just make your way throughout zone 160, killing off enemy by enemy. Inside zone 160, you'll also be able to find the bulkhead door control and the door to the extreme objective. However, we do not have a bulkhead key yet, so instead we're going to head to the eastern side of the zone. We'll find the security door to zone 161, this door having no scan tied to it whatsoever. Inside Zone 161, you can expect to see pretty much the same thing as Zone 160, a few regular strikers and shooters, a fair amount of giant strikers and hybrids, but there will also be a few charger scouts in here. So be cautious of them. You definitely want to make sure you get rid of them first if you are able to, since them waking up is a huge issue for you, but they shouldn't be too difficult to deal with because again, you got C-foam grenades and trip mines, no problem. Clear out all of Zone 161, and in here you'll also be able to find the bulkhead door control and the door to the rest of your main objective sector. However, we still don't have a bulkhead key, so our only option is to go to the security door to Zone 162, which is going to be a blood door. And dealing with a blood door without ammunition or mine could be a bit difficult. Thankfully though, there is a very high chance you'll be provided with at least one explosive trip mine somewhere inside Zone 160 or 161. So keep an eye out, look at the shelves, look in the corpses, look in the boxes and lockers, and see if you can find one. If you do, go back to the blood door and open it up, but do not place the mine on the blood door itself. Instead, after you open it up, fall back into Zone 160, take a left, and immediately go through that big door right there. Then just shut it behind you, hit it with a C-foam grenade, and place a mine on the door. Make sure that the other two doors that lead into your room are kept shut when you're doing this, by the way, otherwise the enemies will just reroute and go through them instead. But if you do it right, all the enemies will pile up on that door, start breaking the C-foam off, and then when they break it down, the mine will go off, and almost every single one of them should be killed off by it. You just have to melee kill the few that are still left alive. Once they're all dead though, you can head to Zone 162, and in there, you'll basically find pretty much the same thing as before. There will be a few enemies potentially still sleeping, so be careful of them. You'll be able to find more C-foam products like grenades and trip mines, maybe a med pack or two, but more importantly, you'll be able to find your first bulkhead key. At this point, you could go back out and plug it into one of the two door controls. If you're only going for the main objective, you're going to want to plug it into the door control inside Zone 161, as this will unlock the security door to Zone 163. However, if you're going for the extreme objective, you need to go back to Zone 160 and plug into that door control, as that will give you access to the extreme objective. So if you only care about the main objective portion of this guide, jump to the timestamp that you see on screen, and we'll continue talking about Zone 163 there. The rest of this though, we're going to head to the extreme bulkhead door and open it up as there's no scan tied to it, and we're going to head into Zone 277 and deal with the extreme objective. Upon entering into Zone 277, you'll see that your extreme objective is to find the terminal in the zone with you and put a special backdoor terminal command into it. The thing is though, this terminal is password locked, and the password is going to be split between a terminal inside Zone 278 and a terminal inside Zone 279. But before we go into those zones, we need to deal with 277 itself, because just like before, we are not going to have a single ammo pack or tool refill in here, just consumables and med packs. But instead of having things like giant strikers and hybrids like we did before in the main objective sector, inside of the extreme objective sector, we're only going to see enemies like shadows, shadow giants, and shadow scouts. So be very cautious when going through the zone, rely on the person with the biotracker or people with thermal scope weapons if anybody did bring one of those with them, and just deal with these enemies one by one. When it comes to doing shadow giants or shadow scouts, just use a C-foam grenade or trip mine, that way you don't risk them waking up and alerting a bunch more enemies, and you really shouldn't have too much difficulty. Then once you clear out all of Zone 277, you're actually going to want to backtrack into the main objective sector and use a terminal out there to see which one of the two zones, 278 or 279, has your second bulkhead key. The reason for this is because we don't have to go into both Zone 278 and 279. And even though both of them do have resources in them, or I should say med packs in them, we don't really have to go and grab those. This level gives you more than enough health to survive pretty much the entirety of the level. And because these zones are going to have a lot of shadows, shadow giants, and shadow scouts in them, you're potentially risking a lot of HP all the way across the team just to grab maybe like a 2 or 3 use med pack, which really just isn't worth it. So figure out which one of the two zones has the bulkhead key and then go into that specific zone. Go throughout it, get the med pack or med packs if you can, if they're not in a risky spot. Find the terminal, which will give you the first 2 or the last 2 letters of the password for the terminal 277, and get the bulkhead key. Then once you have all that, go back to 277 and go to that terminal and start guessing what the password is. Because with the first 2 or the last 2 letters, you should honestly be able to guess what the password is. You literally have 2 out of 4, so just do a few attempts and you should be able to get it. Worst case scenario, you literally have no clue whatsoever what the password might be, even after about 30 or 40 attempts, in which case you could just simply go into the other zone and get to the terminal and just figure out what the other 2 letters are. Once you put the correct password in though, it will unlock the terminal and you'll be able to put the backdoor command into it. But once you put the command into it, you do not want to finish the full team scan that appears. We need to finish this in order to complete the objective, but we actually want to go back and do a little bit more of the main objective first while the lights are still on, and then come back here. Because finishing this command is going to cause the entire level to be enveloped in pitch black darkness. So for now, leave this be, leave the zone, and then go back to the main sector, plug the bulkhead key into the door control that's inside Zone 161. Then you can head over to security door Zone 163, which will just be a checkpoint scan. Do that scan, and then the door will automatically open up, and you can continue on with the rest of the main objective. Moving forward into zone 163, we're basically going to be seeing the same thing as we've been seeing before. Regular strikers and shooters, giant strikers, potentially some giant shooters, hybrids, and even more charger scouts. And of course, no ammunition, no tool refill, just med packs and a lot of consumables like C4 grenades and trip mines. So make your way throughout this zone, being cautious as this is a pretty big zone and the second room can have a lot of enemies inside of it. So do your best to not wake up the entire room or just wake up a charger scout, as this can lead to 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes of you just running around killing enemies with melee one after another, using C4 grenades left and right, and reviving your teammates as they die over and over and over and over again. I may or may not be speaking from experience. But once you clear out this entire zone, you'll be able to go to the eastern side where you'll find the uplink terminal that you need to complete the main objective. However, before you put that uplink connect command into it, if you're somebody who is doing the extreme objective, you are now going to want to backtrack real quick into the extreme sector and finish that full team scan that was on that terminal. This will cause the lights in the level to go out completely, and this will fully finish your extreme objective. Obviously, if you're just doing the main objective, this is something you don't have to worry about. Instead, what you're going to want to do, and I guess even the extreme people are going to want to do this next, is go to the ladder to the entrance of the room like you can see my team doing, and place a C-foam trip mine or 2 down in this spot. The reason for this is because when you initiate this uplink terminal, it's going to do sort of what an uplink terminal does, although a bit different. It's going to have codes on it. There's going to be a total of 4 that you're going to have to deal with, and while these codes are active, you're going to have waves of enemies spawning in. Although these waves are going to be few and far in between, and only 2 chargers are going to be spawning in per wave, which is pretty easy to deal with. Although I suppose it makes sense as you have no ammunition, so doing a regular uplink might have been a bit too much. So having 3 people defend here by the ladder will cause all the chargers that spawn in to just jump down that ladder and trip the C-foam trip mine and get covered in it. So then you can just simply kill them as they hit the ground, or if they get stuck midair, just melee kill them before they have the chance to break out and actually attack you. Overall, I think on average I've only ever had to deal with 4 or 6 chargers throughout this entire uplink before the person on the terminal finishes it. Once the uplink is finished though, you'll see a 10-minute and 20-second timer appear at the top of your screen, and Henriksen and Schaefer are going to start talking to each other. Which, long story short, as Schaefer rushes Henriksen, Henriksen ends up tripping an alarm, so now the entire sector is going under lockdown, and once that 10-minute and 20-second timer hits 0, it's going to initiate a warden survival protocol where waves upon waves of powerful enemies are going to be spawning in and coming after you, and Henriksen has to work desperately to try to unlock security door after security door for you. That way you can actually make it to the extraction point. But the thing is, doing all that without resources is next to impossible. So we need to make our way to the armory, which is inside of zone 165. That way we can finally get some ammunition and tool refill. But we only have basically 9 minutes and 50 seconds to do it, because I believe around the 9-minute 50-second mark, the security door to zone 164, which is at the far eastern side of the zone, will automatically open up. So at this point, we need to move quick, but do not be too hasty, because throughout all of zone 164, you're going to see a lot of giant strikers, hybrids, and charger scouts. And waking up all these enemies is going to waste a lot of your valuable time. So take it room by room, sort of like you can see my team doing. Deal with some of the enemies, especially that first room. Everything in there should ideally die. But once you start making it to the second room and the third room, the only things that really need to be dealt with are the charger scouts. Anything else for the most part, you could just leave alive and stealth right past it until you make your way to the final room of this zone. And in there, once again, make sure the door is shut behind you and deal with every single one of the enemies in here. There are also going to be a few explosive mines throughout this entire zone that you can't pick up, and I definitely recommend that you grab at least 1 or 2 of them, as the security door to zone 165 is going to be a blood door. So when you do get to the final room and you clear all of it out, you're going to want to place 2 mines on this blood door. One like you normally would, facing up against it, and one like you can see me doing on the little barrel facing directly into the door. That way, with the combination of these 2 mines, almost every single enemy from the blood door should die. So once you have them set up, open up the door, fall back a little, let the enemies trip the mines. Then you can head inside zone 165. Be careful, as there might still be 1 or 2 hybrids sleeping in the second room. But go throughout it, deal with those hybrids if they do exist, and grab those resources as quickly as you can. Heal everybody up as much as you can, refill everybody's ammunition, but don't be greedy, don't take it all for yourself. Everybody on the team deserves to have a bit. And when it comes to tool refill, put a pretty fair amount of it mostly in the mine deployer, but also put a little bit into the sentries as well, as they don't really need a whole lot right here now, but they will need a fair amount later in the level. But once you have distributed all the resources inside of here, you're going to want to make your way back into zone 163 and go to the northern end of it, where you'll find the security door to zone 166. This security door is a checkpoint scan door, however, it will not unlock until that timer hits 0. If you're doing really good on time, you should be able to make it back with anywhere from maybe 1.5 to 2.5 minutes left to spare. in which case you could basically just chill in that room and talk with each other a bit, as there's not really anything else you could do. Maybe you can run back to the uplink terminal and see if there's any nearby med packs that you can go and grab, but if that's not the case, just simply wait by that door, and once that timer hits 0, you're going to activate the checkpoint scan, finish it, and head inside, as you now have to survive for 20 minutes before you're allowed to leave the level. And this is where things get a little bit difficult when it comes to me in this level guide, because Warden Survival Protocol objective type things are not the easiest to talk about. There are so many different things that could go wrong or right during this portion of the level that I could give you a really good strategy, I could show you footage of me doing such really good strategy, but that's not going to be you sometimes. Sometimes you will have really good RNG and your enemies will be in places where you don't have to go, or your resources will be along the beam path, so you'll pick them up super easily. And you'll have runs where it seems like every single one of your resources are hiding from you and every single enemy decided to come meet you because they're throwing you a surprise party. It can be difficult actually strategizing for this part. So I would highly recommend that while I'm talking about the rest of the level, pay close attention to the background footage and try to understand what my team and I are doing. Just learn from our strategies and how we're playing, because there's so many different ways you could do this, and depending on what situation you find yourself in, you're going to have to adapt your strategy and just work on the fly. Don't be idle. You have to be doing something at all moments. Either you're looking for resources, or you're actively defending against the waves of enemies coming after you, or you're moving into the next zone because there's not really a reason for you to stay behind in the current zone you're in. If you're not certain what you should be doing, ask your team what they want you to do and how you can help them out, and just make sure you're contributing, because this is one of those harder level objectives and everybody has to be pulling their weight, otherwise you are going to wipe and you're going to be returning back to that checkpoint from earlier. As for the people who are playing this, if you're going for simply just the main objective, this portion of the level isn't honestly all that hard for you, because you just have to survive for 20 minutes. And during this, you're going to have waves of things like strikers, shooters, giant strikers, and hybrids spawning in, but that's about it. Around the 5 to 6 minute mark, I do believe a snatcher will spawn in, and about 1 minute after the timer hits 0, you'll have a tank and I think also another snatcher spawning in. But overall, this isn't really too difficult for you to deal with as long as you're staying active. Run through the zones, shut the doors behind you, mine them, maybe C-foam grenade them if most of the wave isn't at the door yet when the first few enemies are breaking it down. Look for resources, use terminals to ping the location of resources and go and grab them. You're just going through zone by zone because you have to wait for the next zone to unlock. Zone 166 is unlocked by default, and so is 167, but Zone 168 doesn't unlock until the 15-minute timer, 169 doesn't unlock until the 10-minute timer, 170 doesn't unlock until the 5-minute timer, and 171 doesn't unlock until the timer hits 0. So really for you, I would just advise go through the zones, clear out the sleeping enemies if there are any in the zones. Some will have some will not. Find good places to hold out against enemies. We have a nice little funnel, that way it's very easy for you to shoot and deal with those enemies. Use mines on doors when you can. If you don't have doors, plop down your sentries. And just have sort of some people focus primarily on shooting and dealing with the waves of enemies, while the other people focus primarily on finding the ammo packs and tool refills and medipacks. And then once the next sector unlocks, go to that security door, open it up, and head right on in. Just be careful of Zone 169 because that zone is basically a straight corridor type zone. So if you use every single door as you go throughout it, once you get to the back end of it and you get all the resources and then you start turning around and try to make your way out of that zone, that way you can then head to Zone 170, you might find yourself in a sticky situation because you have no doors in front of you that you can use since you already used them all up, and you're going to have a lot of waves of enemies still coming after you, so it might be really difficult to push through those enemies and actually make some headway. But other than that, there's not really a whole lot I need to mention, I think, when it comes to just the main objective portion. But when it comes to those of us who are going for the overall objective, there's a whole lot more I need to talk about. And it's a bit of an interesting gameplay because you won't be sitting around nearly as much. Every single moment really matters when you go for overload because you need to go and complete the overload objective and then make it to extraction. And I would say that most groups who go for the overload objective, by the time you finish it, you'll usually have about 1 to 3 minutes left on that clock. So by the time you actually make it to the final security door, it will either just be unlocking as you get to it or it already would have unlocked. So there's not really a whole lot of waiting around you need to do, but that isn't necessarily a good thing because there's a lot more dangerous stuff you do have to deal with. So let's go through zone by zone. Inside Zone 166, you are going to be able to find the bulkhead door control as well as the door to the overload objective. However, you do not have the third and final bulkhead key yet, so you want to make your way through the zone until you get to the security door to Zone 167, which is going to be a blood door. When you're dealing with this blood door, I recommend that the door that leads into the room you're in, make sure you shut it, mine it, and C-foam it, and then you quickly mine the blood door and deal with that. That way you have protection from behind against the enemy spawning in, and you have protection from the front when it comes to the blood door enemies. Even then though, most of the enemies will not die to that blood door, so you will have to shoot quite a bit, and since you are on the open, you want to make quick work of those hybrids, otherwise they will chew through you and your team. If the wave does catch up from behind you and they break into the room, I recommend you sort of have 1 or 2 people focus from behind, and the other people focus in front and deal with the blood door as fast as they can. Once all the blood door enemies are dead, you're either going to all 4 go in there and look for the bulkhead key as well as resources and just mine doors behind you to deal with the enemies who chase you in, or you're going to split into 2 teams of 2, which is honestly the method I prefer to use. 2 people go in looking for the bulkhead key and things like ammo and tool refill. If they find med, they can also just use it on themselves since you want to make sure you get the ammo and tool above all else. And then the other 2 people outside, they're just going to defend on that walkway that leads from the door to your room to the blood door. And you're going to plop down 1 sentry and just hold out there. These people should be the ones who have more ammunition on the team, or at least better guns for dealing with these type of enemies, since they're going to have to deal with strikers, shooters, hybrids, giant strikers, as well as shadow strikers and giant shadows if they did go and do the extreme objective. So one of those 2 people should also be the bio-tracker person. For the 2 people who are defending, when you're in between waves, you can also look throughout the zone a little bit to try to find some more ammunition or tool refill to refill that sentry, but just be careful you don't wander too far, because once the next wave spawns in, you want to make sure that you're back there you can defend. That way the wave doesn't get past you, go into the blood door area and start attacking the people who are not expecting anything to show up whatsoever. Once you get the bulkhead key though, all of you are going to rush out. You're going to backtrack a little bit inside zone 166, go back to that door control. I recommend that the big door that leads into that room is preserved for this moment. That way you can shut it, mine, and C-foam it. And that way you can deal with the full team scan for the overload bulkhead door. And then you can also hop on the terminal that's in the room and use it to ping any resources that are still in the zone. Since if you haven't found anything up to this point, there's a pretty high chance that somewhere between you and that door control and the bulkhead door itself. So if you ping them and you get the general location of them, you can grab them as you're moving to the overload bulkhead door. But as you make your way through, grab the resources, get to the door. This is just going to be an open bulkhead door, so you can open it up and head into zone 328. Inside zone 328, you'll see that your overall objective is to find 2 specific terminals and create an uplink at both of them. The first terminal will always be inside zone 329, and as far as I'm aware, the second terminal will always be inside zone 331. Zone 330 seems to be a bait zone. I don't think the terminal can ever possibly spawn in there. I think it's just an optional resource zone, but there's really no reason you should ever go into 330, so completely ignore that zone. Inside zone 328 though, there will be a fair amount of strikers and shooters. The first 2 rooms are pretty small, but the second 2 rooms are quite big. So deal with these small rooms quickly, and then either you could shut the doors behind you and mine and C-foam them if you can, or you could just plop down 1 or both of your sentries and have 2 people defend, while 2 people push up and just deal with each room one by one. When you get into the third room, I honestly recommend you just simply pull the room and let the enemies come to you, as the enemies can be spread all throughout it. And then once you dealt with that room, open up the big door and then shoot in there to pull the 4th room and just let the enemies come to you. Once you deal with every single one of the enemies and this zone is empty, you can grab any resources that are in boxes of lockers nearby, or if you desperately need them, look around a little bit for them. But then once you're good to go to zone 329, you're going to want to shut the big doors behind you, mine them and C-foam them, and then make your way to the blood door immediately. When it comes to this blood door, it's going to be spawning a few regular chargers as well as a pretty fair amount of giant strikers. And the thing is, zone 329 can have sleeping giant chargers inside of it. So I recommend you place 2 mines on the blood door if you can afford it. If not, 1 will do just enough. And then you're going to open that blood door and fall back up the staircase and go backward a little bit towards that catwalk. You're going to plop down 1 or both of your sentries facing towards that blood door, or maybe 1 from behind you in case that door behind you is starting to get hit on by the enemies. And then as soon as you're done with it, get into zone 329 and start looking for resources ASAP. When you go up the staircase, you'll be able to see 1 terminal right there in front of you. I recommend you get to this, plop down both of your sentries facing towards that staircase that leads up to where you just came from, and 2 people are going to be defending there. The other 2 people are going to be going throughout the zone looking for resources and then moving into the second room, which almost always will have 2 giant chargers sleeping inside of it. They deal with the giant chargers really quickly, and then in there they'll be able to find 3 more terminals. One of these 4 terminals in this entire zone is going to be one of the 2 uplink terminals that you need. Once you find it, hop on it and put the uplink connect command into it immediately. Because the thing is, this uplink itself will not actually spawn in any additional enemies, so there's not really any reason to not put it in. The other thing too is this is not a typical uplink terminal. This is actually a 2-person uplink terminal. So once you put that one in, it's going to tell you to find another terminal in the zone and use uplink confirm on it. So the other person who's in that zone is going to go to that terminal, which will either be one of the other 2 in the room with them, or it's going to be the terminal in the previous room where the other 2 people are defending with the sentries. If that's the case, they go out there, the 2 people work on the uplink and get that done as fast as they can. There are 3 codes in total they're going to have to do. Once you finish the first uplink terminal though, things are going to get drastically easier for you because it seems like the first uplink terminal upon completion will drastically slow down the rate at which these waves are going to spawn in. So take advantage of this time and use one of the terminals in the zone to ping any resources that are still in here with you. If those resources are very far off to the east beyond that big door in the room with the 3 terminals, don't even bother. That place is a maze and it's really not worth going in there unless the resource is like right on the outside of the door. But after that and you're good to go or move on to the next segment, you're going to want to go to the northeast side of the room where that small door is, open it up and go down in there. because in there at the bottom of the ramp, you'll be able to find the security door to zone 331, which is just an open security door. There will be some regular strikers and shooters in here, so quickly deal with them. Defenders, you could just simply plop down your sentries facing towards that security door, maybe near the base of the staircase or the ladder, and you're just going to be holding out there. The other two people go throughout the zone, grab resources really quick, deal with the strikers and shooters like I mentioned, and then you're going to look for the terminals. 3 of them are going to be at the top of the staircase through the small room that you can see right ahead of you. The other one though is actually going to be up the ramp on the opposite side of the room at the top of the ladder that you can find over there. Most of the time I find that both of my terminals are in that small room, but I have had a few situations where it is the one on the opposite end of the zone, which if that's the case, it's really not that big of a deal. Same thing, the 2 people who are going to deal with the uplinks, hop on the terminals, start working on that. It's going to be 3 codes just like before, but be careful because around this point, you should be getting close to the 5 or 6 minute mark, or you've at least passed that moment. And like I said earlier, around the 5 to 6 minute mark, a snatcher is going to spawn in. So if you hear the snatcher spawn in right before you're about to deal with the uplink, I actually recommend you deal with it first, because I do believe there is a bug where if you get snatched while you're on a terminal, there is a chance it will soft lock the terminal and make it impossible to actually complete the objective. So deal with him first and then do the uplink. Then once you finish this uplink, you are going to want to regroup with your team as fast as you can, because finishing the second uplink is going to do 2 things. The first thing is it's going to spawn in a wave of chargers and giant chargers who are going to spawn outside of the zone. So meet up with the people who are defending at the bottom with the 2 sentries, ping those chargers and giant chargers as they get close to you, and deal with them as fast as you possibly can. Be very careful as those giant chargers will hurt you like crazy if they do get on you, so fall back a little bit if they get too close. But once they're all dead, you're going to want to start moving. Because the second thing that finishing the second uplink terminal will do is it will make it so that the rest of the normal waves of things like strikers, shooters, giant strikers, hybrids, and shadow type enemies will no longer happen. Instead, they're going to be replaced with waves of chargers. But the nice thing is it seems like the first wave of chargers will not spawn in for about 1.5 minutes or maybe even 2 minutes. And even when they do spawn in, I feel like it's only about 5 or 6 regular chargers and that's it. It actually becomes a whole lot easier to deal with the rest of the level once you finish the second uplink. But even then, that's not a reason to dilly-dally, because by this point, you should be getting pretty close to that timer hitting 0 and you want to get to extraction as fast as you can. So pack up your sentries, grab any resources that might be right there next to you, and backtrack as fast as you can to get out the overload bulkhead door. Once you leave the overload bulkhead door, just go to the right and you'll be able to find the security door zone 168. By this point, that door is definitely unlocked, so just open it up and just make your way north. You can grab resources if they're right there along the beaten path, but do not go out of your way to try to find more. Just keep making your way north until you get to the security door 170, open that up, make it in, and then get to the far north and end where you find the security door to zone 171. If the timer is not quite at 0, you can spend any extra time to just look around this zone, as there are a lot of resources inside zone 170 that you can use. By this point, I think a charger wave or 2, maybe even 3 or 4 of them should have spawned in, so you will have to deal with them by either just mining doors or just shooting them when they arrive. But as soon as that timer hits 0, you're going to want 3 people to go into that room and get on that extraction scan while 1 person stays outside. The reason for this is because you do not want that tank to spawn in maybe a little bit early and then rush into the room, since the extraction scan room doesn't have any cover whatsoever. So if all 4 of you are in there and maybe you're a little bit late, that tank is going to come in and is going to mess up you people while you're on that scan. So have 3 people in there while 1 person with a lot of HP, ammo, as well as maybe both of the sentries just stays outside, and they could just keep the tank busy as well as deal with any few chargers that might spawn in, while the other people work on getting the extraction scan to 100%. Once you do manage that and you do get the extraction scan to 100%, you are done and you have beaten R7C3. And that's all there really is to it. R7C3 is quite unique, as it's the only level in GTFO history that started you off with no ammunition or toy fill whatsoever, but it decides to pull a fast one on you by flipping it 180 into a Warden Survival Protocol about halfway through. I would have liked to see a level where you weren't given any ammo or toy fill at any point throughout it, but hey, I suppose there's always next time. After all, this was just the first iteration of the idea. As always though, thank you for watching this video all the way to the very end. I do hope it was able to provide you with some assistance in beating this level. I know the second half of the explanation was a little bit at best, but hey, not really much I could do with it. I actually redid this take over and over and over again for probably a good solid hour and a half, and really I couldn't come out with a solution that I was more satisfied with than the recording that you actually listened to. So hey, hopefully it helped you out. But if you have any tips or tricks for this level that you want to share, or any questions for me, or you just simply have something in general that you want to say, please do let me know down in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and if you want to join the community I'm building, there's a link to my Discord down in the description, as well as some other cool links. Among those links being one that will take you to the official GTFO merch store, which I highly recommend you check out if you're a fellow GTFO enthusiast. Until next time, remember how much of a blessing ammunition and tool refill are. After all, you don't know how valuable something is until after you've lost it. And I'll see you all in the next video.